Welcome to episode 102 of I Thought I Knew How, a podcast about knitting and life and all sorts. I'm your host, Anne Frost, and this episode was recorded on June 23rd, 2023. I have lots to share with you today because we are going to get well and truly caught up ahead of a series of interviews I'll be bringing you through the summer as part of the make-along I'm hosting with the Journal of Scottish Yarns. If you are asking yourself, what make-along are you hosting with the Journal of Scottish Yarns? I will say welcome, for you must be new here, and redirect you to episode 101 where I talk all about it, because this episode will be full enough on its own. And since we do have lots to get to, I think we should. I did say in the last episode that I would talk about what has been going on lately. If you are on social media or have been one of my patrons, you know already, but I know some people aren't on social media and just listen to the show. So I'm going to take a few minutes to explain some changes that have already taken place and that will continue as the year progresses. I am going to be seeing through my commitments that I have made in and to the knitting industry, which will take me to the end of this year. At that point, I will carry on with the podcast, as well as certain specific activities that I will thoroughly assess before saying yes to determine whether they are something that will benefit my personal and professional growth and learning and be a benefit to my listeners, or whether they are just busy things or things that sound awesome and are in fact awesome, but put too much on my plate for me to feel like a balanced, sane human being. One notable thing that has changed is that I have made the decision to no longer host the Mac and Our Way Through Shetland tours. My tour partner, Jolene at Island Vista Shetland, will be taking them over fully in 2024 and beyond. The tours will continue. They have been a massive success, and the interest in them is still high, and I still feel very proud of them and endorse them strongly. I just am taking them off my plate. When you start anything in any new field, I feel like people often get the advice to say yes to everything. Everything that comes your way, take it, because it's an opportunity to learn and get your name out there and all the things. I also personally suffer greatly from the fear of missing out, and there is still the poor kid from a divorced home living in a corner of my psyche who feels she needs to prove herself. Add all of those things together, and you end up with an overfull professional life. You do a lot of learning, yes. You find a lot of things that you are good at and a lot of things that you are well suited for and a lot of things that you enjoy. But you also find a lot of things that for one reason or another are just not a great fit. You also can find yourself in a position of doing things you like that are good things, but take you away from the things you love. And on top of all that, sometimes your life just changes in one way or another that makes it so that the thing you liked just doesn't feel comfortable anymore. Sometimes even the things you love don't feel comfortable anymore. I know I'm not being very specific, and there is a reason for that. When you share aspects of your life with people in any form of social media, including podcasts, you do so forever. I'm telling you this story now, but I'm also telling the person who finds the podcast 5 years from now, or I'm telling you about it again in the future if you re-listen to this episode, or I'm telling my great-great-grandchildren. And in the meantime, I've moved on. I'm on to new life challenges and joys. I was talking to a friend the other day who knows all the specifics of what I've been going through, and who works in the knitting industry as well, and I made the following observation, and I think it applies here. There are things you go through in your life that you carry always. You're always marked by them, and regrowing your life around them and taking them out of your pocket now and then to deal with them. Those are the things that I think can be shared with strangers. Those personal but universal things that stay with us. I would say that losing my mother is one of those things. I shared very openly about that, and I don't regret it at all. I still carry that all these years later. So if someone meets me for the first time at a fiber festival or in a chat, and they tell me that what I shared helped them, I'm glad. And I'm sad with them. And I'm grateful to them for voicing a reminder that a lot of people out there are also marked by losing a parent and are growing their lives around that and have to take it out of their pocket now and then to deal with it. But there are other things you experience in your life that you don't carry with you. You experience them, you learn from them, and then you set them down and you move on with your life. And those are the things that I have learned are not wise to share on the podcast. Because if we all listened to the podcast the week it came out and had a discussion about that thing that week, that might be helpful. But what often happens is people discover the podcast and listen from the beginning and then reach out when they hear me talk about something that they are experiencing and want to chew it over with me. But I'm done with it. I don't want to chew on that thing anymore. Picking it back up to look at it again sparks feelings that range from sadness to boredom to regret to feeling like I'm being asked to resolve something again that's been resolved. I've put that thing down and moved on from it, and I don't want to go over it again. There are a handful of people out there who know everything about my life, and they know what I recently navigated. They know why I made the professional decision I did, and they're supportive. But after I made the decision to shed a great deal of what I've been doing and rebuild with intention, I knew I was going to have to tell people, especially my lovely patrons and sponsors, because as I move forward, I'm going to be personally funding the podcast, and they deserve a proper thank you. They have been wonderful. They are the people who stepped in when I couldn't afford to fund the podcast and helped me keep it going. They're magnificent. And you, my listeners, are going to notice changes in the future, so it makes sense to share with you that those changes are coming. This mental shift, professional shift, came not just as the result of my working in the knitting field as an educator, advocate, and promoter. I had a couple of really crazy months in my personal life, really life-shaking stuff. Had I not had that personal life stuff happening, I don't know that I would have decided to make the professional shift. But that stuff did happen, and it would have happened at some point, so it really doesn't matter that it happened now. You can't burn a candle at both ends while hovering it over a lit burner on the stove. Everything came together in a moment a few months ago, and a decision had to be made, so I made it. Confidently, and with a sense of relief and excitement about future possibilities. There are people out there who saw my social media post saying I was paring back and started asking around to see if they could find out the real reason why I'm making this shift. They are asking me slightly pressing questions. They're seeking out friends of mine and pressing them not so subtly for answers just because they are curious. So I will say this: nothing bad has happened in my life. I am healthy. My marriage is fine. The kids are doing better than they have in years. My business relationships, including my network of knitters, designers, teachers, tour guides, promoters, editors, wool producers, it's all still strong. I am still happily plugging away at my current commitments, and I am enjoying doing them. I still plan to visit Shetland regularly for extended periods of time, as well as traveling elsewhere with my husband and on my own to learn about knitting and yarn production in other areas of the world. In fact, this paring back is going to allow me to do that more. But I had a few crazy months, and I expect that none of it is the sort of thing that's going to be something that I carry always. Some of it I've already been able to put down and move on from. Some of it is still being processed, and I feel like I will slowly lay it down over the next few years, but I'll get to a point where I will set it down and I will move on from it. And for those reasons, they're not things that I want to share on the podcast. It's all going to be stuff that eventually gets set down, moved on from, and that I don't think I'm going to want to revisit. Honestly, if I told you what they were, chances are slim that you would feel their import the way I did as they happened. I have an incredibly boring day-to-day life. Not boring, like I live an interesting life, I think, to me. But as far as like scandal and whatever, you're not going to find any of that here. I'm sorry. Not really, though. I'm the one who has to live it. I'm actually pretty happy to be able to say that. My friends who know the whole of it have been incredibly supportive. My patrons have been supportive. My family's been supportive. I think I'm going to be able to be better at the things I really love doing as we go into the future, and I'll have more space to explore things I've been wanting to do, and that makes me happy. And again, the podcast is going nowhere. That is the foundation. I'm already thinking over some blueprints for what to build on top of it again. Some of the current structure will be saved as I build a new edifice for the future. Some will be reshaped and some will be replaced. It's just time to build a more comfortable home. A song. Let's have a song. I like this one from Nicholas Rowe. It's called I Built It Myself. He's talking about love, building a loving relationship. He couldn't find it, so he built it himself. This sentiment is resonating with me right now. Such is life. Patience isn't lying there on the ground. Self-confidence doesn't grow on trees. You can't order a sense of peace on Amazon. The lives we want are built on conscious effort. We craft the lives we want. Enjoy, and I'll be back with you in a few minutes.
I couldn't find true love, so I built it myself. Started at my backbone and I built it out from there. I put a little garden in the hardness of my heart, kept a couple promises, and that was the start of this love. I didn't find it, I built it myself. Blueprints down for everything in my poems and my songs. Made some friends along the way and found a place to call my own. Learned as I went, I did a little more each day. Now everything you see here is our domain. I didn't find it like this though, I built it myself. You might say I'm lucky, you wouldn't be wrong, but it takes more than luck to build a love this strong. Well, I would give up everything and then give a little more. Nothing else I'd rather be working for. I couldn't find true love, so I built it myself. I started at my backbone and I built it out from there. I put a little garden in the hardness of my heart. I kept a couple promises, and that was the start of this love. I didn't find it, I built it myself. I built it myself.
I have been knitting with wire lately. Not exclusively, just in bits and bobs. I signed up for a class with Helen Robertson to design and knit my own tiara. Helen is born and based in Shetland, where she is a jewelry designer and artist and knitting designer and teacher. Some of you may have recently seen her 12-hour event where she knitted the fabric for a lawn chair. She started by winding the yarn and was just able to get it attached before the self-declared time limit. As she knit, she was accompanied by a changing group of local knitters who chatted with Helen about all sorts of things and kept her going and offered their assistance as she needed it. There is a link to a video recording of all 12 hours, and I will put it in the show notes. I love it. Helen has been knitting tiaras and wire jewelry pieces for years now. One of her wire lace cuffs is in the permanent display of Shetland lace in the Shetland Museum and Archives as an example of how Shetland lace is being brought forward. Also in the Shetland Museum and Archives are ceiling light fixtures with knit wire lampshades that Helen made. I had a class with Helen during the lockdowns where we met weekly on Zoom to knit a small project that we could complete in an hour. It was such a nice treat for me to be involved in an online event that I wasn't hosting myself. And Helen always included a period of time where we deliberately knit in silence, which was as welcome as the time we had to chat together. She's also developed a way of knitting Fair Isle that is unique to her. She calls it Fizzy Fair Isle and teaches the method at Wool Week and online, and is developing a book to teach the method as well. It's a testament to the respect knitters feel for Helen once they've met her, that no one has taken this method and started teaching it themselves. I took the class with her last year, and it was a very clever technique, and the time spent in her class was just as calm and rejuvenating as the online course was. All this to say that when Helen put out feelers to say she was going to teach a 4-part design and knit your own tiara class, I was thrilled to have the chance to learn wire knitting from her. I was able to get the box of supplies from her just before leaving Shetland the last time I was there. The kit I purchased came with 2 tiara bases, 3 spools of colored wire, and a total of 5 spools of silver-plated copper wire in various gauges. In our first class, Helen covered a lot of information about wire thicknesses to needle sizes, bead sizes to consider, and tips for working with wire before having us cast on to knit a very small swatch just to get a feel for it. Wire, of course, has very little give. It has no give. And it looks like a heaping mess as you knit it up. But when you're done and pull it into shape, it spreads beautifully and you can see the design. We tried a small leaf next, and same thing. It just sort of looked like a mess until we were done and pulled it into a shape. And we're like, oh, there's my leaf. I had an issue with the actual knitting of the wire at first. I just couldn't get the working needle into the stitch on the row before, but going to a larger needle completely solved that, took all the aggravation out of it. I also had a spool sort of explode on me, sending several wraps of the wire off to form a tangled spaghetti heap in midair. Helen shared a brilliant tip to pass the wire underneath the spool and up through the center, and then use it to work with, and that just totally tamed it. At this point, as long as I watch for kinks and unkink them, all is well. In the second class, we learned how to place beads 4 different ways, all of which are ways you can do when you're placing beads on yarn knitting projects, but in some cases, they're a little bit trickier with wire, only slightly though, and we were all feeling comfortable with it by the end of the class. So it was time to design. I had a plan for a tiara for my youngest, who is off to college in New York City at the end of the summer, but I ran it by her and she said there was no way she would wear it. So, moving on from that, I decided just to make one for myself to start with. I'm planning to do one that's basically, I think it's just going to be a long rectangle aligned with the tiara base, but I'll place beads in the stitching to form the top half of a Norwegian star. I thought at first about doing a full Norwegian star pattern on a rectangular base for a tiara, but I think that would create a tiara that is way too tall. I have a gradient of 3 shades of pink beads, and I'm looking for silver or clear bead to use to outline the edging of the tiara. I'm still looking out for that. I will have one more tiara to design after this one. I may go for a lace style next. Knitting with wire. It's really been a lot of fun. I'd recommend getting into a class to get all of the little tips that make it easier. I'm sure Helen will be repeating this class again. Or, look for something local to you. It has been a joyful twist on knitting. Let's take a few minutes to knit or just focus more fully on what we're doing as we listen together. Here's a little song for us to enjoy while we turn our attention to the garden or the walk we're on or the next round of knitting. Maybe you're working on a spreadsheet or up late with a child. Here's a few minutes to just be, and then I'll be back in your ears again. This is The Drifter by Zoze.
I've been drifting across the ocean. I've been searching for the crimson sky. I've been stirring my emotions, looking at the ships go by. Too many roads lead to heavy load. Too many years pass as hard unfolds. Too many roads lead to heavy load. Said the drifter as his words.
I was approached by a yarn producer a couple of months ago when I was in the thick of a lot of things, asking if I'd like a preview box for a new yarn they were releasing. And in all honesty, I groaned a little. I have a lot of yarn already, so the offer of free yarn does not excite the way it used to. And to be honest, I don't necessarily like agreeing to a review of something that I haven't seen in person first, because I don't like giving bad reviews. And when someone has given you something to review, it makes it harder to say the downsides of a product. But I was curious because they said it was an American-grown and spun non-superwash wool. And if there's something we need more of in the yarn marketplace in the States, it's American-grown, American-spun, 100% wool that is not superwash. So I said yes. And a few days ago, I got a notice saying that it had arrived in my post office box. You guys, when I got to the post office and saw the size of the packet, I almost cried with relief. It came in this black self-sealing paper bag, and I could tell just from the size of the bag that it was just a small sample of the yarn. I know this sounds all twisted and backwards, I know, but I have so much yarn. And when a yarn producer in search of a review hands you one or multiple hanks of yarn, it's great. But it's also a chore because the expectation is that you will use all that yarn for a project and you will talk about it in detail and post photos and do a review. And in order to do that review, you will need to email them questions or comb through their website for details so that you can talk about the product semi-intelligently. That free yarn comes with a price, and that price is far more of your time than the cost of the yarn. So to get a packet from Queen City Yarn of Charlotte, North Carolina, with a 10-yard sample of their new yarn called Latta, along with some print materials with photos that showed me the yarn in all of the available colors with the yarn in the hank and the yarn knitted into swatches, along with information about the company and its owners and the details of the yarn and suggestions of patterns that it would work for. That was a blessing. I had enough yarn to swatch with myself. I had all the information I needed to talk about the yarn in my hot little hands already. And I had the sense that this wool producer gets what it's like to be a podcaster and was doing what she could do to make my life easier. If you are a yarn producer looking for a review, I highly recommend that you switch to this model. It is genius. So let's talk about the yarn, shall we? As I said, it's from Queen City Yarn, which is based in Charlotte, North Carolina. The yarn is called Latta and is a sport weight round 3-ply yarn made of merino rambouillet that has been grown in the United States, milled in the Carolinas. It's hand-dyed in 19 semi-solid colors, which includes pastels, jewel tones, a white, and 2 grays. I cast on using a size 4 US needle, which is a 3.5 millimeter. Just 30 stitches with a few rows of garter to start and end with, a border of garter along the edges, stockinette in the middle. I found it very easy to work with. The 3 plies are wound closely enough that it was not splitty at all. It was soft to the touch to work with, and in the 10 yards I had to work with, there was no vegetable matter. The color I got was a semi-solid pink with just the subtle tonality you get with a hand-dyed solid. I don't think you would need to worry about color pooling or anything like that, but the slight variation in shading adds some beautiful tonality to your work rather than looking like a flat, solid block of color. Before and after blocking, there was a very nice drape to it, and the information included with the yarn shares my favorite fact about wool, which is that it can keep you warm in winter and cooler in summer. I will say that as I was knitting it up, I thought that it was working up a little too thick to have the cooling effect. Wool can keep you cooler, but it needs to be in thin layers in order for that aspect of its temperature regulation to work. Now that the swatch is blocked, I'm kind of on the fence, to be honest. I think I'd be willing to try it for a summer tank. Probably not a summer cardigan unless it was very lacy, or I wanted it to be like a summer cardigan for after sundown when the temperatures dipped a bit. I would use it for a shawl or winter accessories, no problem. They do suggest some colorwork projects in their information packet, and I think it would work fine for that. But I get this sense from the feel of the yarn that you'd want to be a little bit more careful with it than a grippy yarn like a Shetland or an Icelandic. It's not sleek like a superwash would be, but it is less toothy than the yarn traditionally used in colorwork. I am kind of in love with it, to be honest. After all I said about being grateful and relieved that I was only sent 10 yarns of this Latta from Queen City Yarns, having had time to swatch with it, I kind of wish they had sent me a whole hank. Oh, the irony! I will be holding on to this swatch with its label to keep in mind for a future project because I do think it is an excellent yarn, well dyed, and I love that it comes from American-grown wool processed in the U.S. Many thanks to Janice at Queen City Yarn for sending me this new yarn to play with, and thank you for doing it in such a respectful way. If you'd like to give it a go, check out the line of Latta yarn from Queen City Yarn. I will put a link in the show notes. One last song for the show. I've said before and I say it again, summer is for country music. This is Outlaw by Brad Howard. Sounds somber, actually funny. Enjoy this one and I'll see you on the other side.
Well, I said, will you? She said yes, and picked out a little white dress. She said church steps. I said fine with that. Then dusted off my cowboy hat. We said a day couldn't wait, so we just ran away and settled for a courthouse hall. And now I'm an outlaw to the in-laws. Her daddy started putting up posters that said Rango and Redneck Reward. Her mama started sending up prayers, begging mercy from the Lord. Well, I stole her away, but I ain't what they say. Didn't tie her up and drag her off. But now I'm an outlaw to the in-laws. Well, I didn't mean to stir the pot when we took off and tied the knot. I tried to call and convince and turning myself in. They want my head for just thinking the thought. And now I'm an outlaw to the in-laws. Her daddy started putting up posters that said Rango and Redneck Reward. Her mama started sending up prayers, begging mercy from the Lord. Well, I stole her away, but I ain't what they say. Didn't tie her up and drag her off. But now I'm an outlaw to the in-laws. Her daddy started putting up posters that said Rango Redneck Reward. Her mama started sending up prayers, begging mercy from the Lord. Well, I may be crazy, but I'm just saying it was her idea all along. So now she's an outlaw to the in-laws. I guess we're both outlaws to the in-laws.
A few more things before I go. The Shetland Hogmanay Mystery yarn boxes are still available, though they are about 75% sold at this point, so I wouldn't put off ordering if you've been meaning to. Each box will have 6 balls of yarn from each of 5 Shetland-based makers for a total of 30 25-gram balls of jumper weight yarn. I commissioned a special pattern from Terry Laura, a well-regarded Shetland-born designer of Fair Isle who created a pattern for your home using all 30 balls of yarn. If for some reason you decided that you don't want an object for your home, you will have enough yarn to make yourself or your loved ones 5 Fair Isle hats or cowls or similarly sized objects. The yarn will all be individually wrapped so that you can open one each day through December as we lead up to New Year's Eve, also called Hogmanay in Scotland. On Hogmanay, there will be a special package with a pattern as well as a selection of gifts from Shetland makers or with a Shetland theme. There are 2 colorways. Box 1 is more spring colors and box 2 is more winter colors. You can find out more about them at store.ithoughtIknewhow.com or use the link in the show notes to get there. Second thing, the day after this episode goes live, those who are going to Shetland Wool Week this year will be able to book their tickets. I am thinking of hosting a dinner gathering, very low-key, everyone pays their own way, on the Friday evening of Wool Week, September 29th. If you would like to join in, please speak up now so I know if the interest is there. Send me an email at ann@ithoughtIknewhow.com or message me on Instagram or Facebook to let me know you'd like to come along and I will get a spot reserved for us. I will be back next week with an interview with Marion Holland, one of the designers from the Journal of Scottish Yarns. However, on June 28th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, 7 p.m. British, I will be hosting an Instagram Live event with Marion and Susan Anderson, the editor of the Journal, as we kick off the Yarn Make-Along 2023. Find that by following me on Instagram, where my username is I Thought I Knew How. Then be sure to be logged in a few minutes early, before 2 Eastern, so you don't miss anything, and watch the story circles at the top of your screen for when I go live. Once you see live appear on my face, hop in and watch. Because in addition to chatting about the make-along, Marion will be offering a giveaway of some lovely yarn. I hope to see you there. In the meantime, thank you for listening and knitting with me for a bit. You will find links to any reference materials I used to prepare the show, as well as things I talked about in the show notes, so be sure to check those out. Find me on my social media accounts as I Thought I Knew How, except on Twitter, where it's just Thought I Knew How. The groups on various platforms are all called I Thought I Knew How Podcast. Until next time, may you be blessed with stitches that never drop, yarn without joins, and plenty of time to knit.